This is a general session. We felt that the topic today was more important for everyone to hear, and so we have brought to you a mock board meeting. This is a typical Rotary meeting. There are a few characters in this play, and they'll all be recognizable to you. What we're going to do is we're going to have a wonderful facilitator who's going to tell you a little bit about what you're seeing, and then you're going to hear how a Rotary Club president might respond to a difficult behavior of a member. And we all know there are none of those people in our clubs. And because it's important for you to know that all theatrical things have disclaimers, I would like to read you the disclaimer. All characters appearing in this work are fictitious. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. However, that may not keep you from recognizing someone you know. I would like to introduce you to our moderator today. Her name is Beverly McClure. She had a 30-year career at USAA, which is one of the largest employers in San Antonio and now other parts of the country. She's a professional coach. She does a lot of work with boards and with executive directors, paid staff. And she and Mike Gillum, who is a Rotarian, who is the president and CEO of the San Antonio Lighthouse for the Blind here in San Antonio, did a program on working together between board chairs and executive directors. And from that, David Ballard came up with the idea that we should have a mock board. So what you will see today is some semi-professional actors, some professional actors, and you will know who they are. And we hope that you will enjoy having the opportunity to learn something about how to deal with difficult members. So thank you for coming. Oh, one last thing. There is some issue about visas for Brazil. If you are planning to go to Brazil, there will be a meeting afterwards in this room to talk about some of the things you ought to know so that you don't get trapped in a situation where you're not completely prepared. Okay?
I'd like to go to Brazil. Well, good afternoon and welcome. As Joan mentioned, when she approached me with this concept, I just couldn't resist it. It's just too much fun. I think that you're going to find it very relevant. We have all been in meetings, whether it's a Rotary Board meeting, it could be a church meeting, a school meeting, a business meeting. We have all been in those meetings where you sit there and someone just takes the meeting off a different direction, is dysfunctional, derails the meeting. Okay? It happens all the time. And isn't it frustrating? I get so angry at the leader. Do something about this, right? You know, it's your job. Do something. Okay? Now, we've also been in the role where we are the leader, right? We're the one that everybody's looking to do something about this individual. And we're frustrated. We're challenged. Not always sure how to correct the behavior, but respect the person. And so we definitely can relate from that standpoint. And then, of course, as we said, none of us have been the culprits of that dysfunctional behavior. So we're not even going to discuss that, but, you know. So I think this is going to be fun. The way we'll play this out, I think what's important is, you know, I'll be the moderator. When you see the behavior, I'm going to freeze the frame. So I'll literally say freeze. And then I'll share with you, here's what we saw. We've actually labeled the behavior, and then we'll share some techniques for you know, what to do about it. I think that what's important, and we're going to have fun with this, I know you're going to see certain individuals are going to come to mind. You're going to have their faces when you see this. But what is important, it is our responsibility as a leader running those meetings to have an effective meeting, an effective board meeting. And it's also our responsibility to have effective board members. And we'll talk about that at the end. So with that, let's call the meeting to order.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for coming. I think the first order of business today is to take a look at the financials, which have been forwarded to you, and they should be on page 3 in your board materials. And you'll see that we are not on track to end this year in the black. And so I'd like to entertain some discussion about the financials and some ideas for recovery.
Madam President,
Sorry.
I've been in this club for 15 years, and I think we're missing an opportunity to have our members contribute more to the bottom line. Now, we enjoy good speakers on a weekly basis. We get a pretty good meal, and we have an extremely capable staff that takes care of all of our logistics. As you know, I'm a member of several other organizations. And in all of them, we pay more for our meals and we pay more for our dues than this club does. As a matter of fact, one of the clubs pays almost double what we pay. I think that we should increase our dues so that we can be financially more successful. Thank you very much.
Freeze. Okay, the name we're giving this person is Rooster. And the reason for that is, you know the person, they're the one who knows it all, and they have this sort of cocky attitude, thus the name Rooster. And so the thing about it is they do have rich experience, right? But what happens when they come on strong, it's always the answer. They have the answer. It's first thing comes out of their mouth. But because they are so strong, it automatically sort of gets people who are a little less confident from speaking. And so it is something that needs to be addressed. One of the things that's important that the president did not do is that while she said we're going to have some ideas, the key here is to establish a process, and brainstorming is the way to do this. So if she had said we're going to have a brainstorming process, you literally review the rules of brainstorming, not because people don't know what brainstorming is, but to remind people that there is no one right answer. This is a free flow of ideas. There's no pros or cons. You know, we're not going to say one idea is a bad idea or not. So you literally go through, and that's very, very helpful to establish that and set those expectations up front, okay? Now, the other thing that is important, if this individual has a pattern, and my guess is yes, as you know, you saw people shaking their heads, rolling their eyes, here she goes again, right? If this person has a pattern, then it's probably a good idea to take offline, and in fact, the president knew she was going to be generating some ideas here. Take that person aside before the meeting and say, look, I really need your help. We're going to talk about, you know, getting some ideas on the table for how we can improve our finances. I need your help. I know you've got such great experience. And what happens, though, is I think people just defer to you for the answer. And I need your help. Would you mind just holding back a bit and let other people, you know, speak? And so then that person feels, oh, well, sure, I can do that. You know, you're appealing to that sort of rooster in them. And so, and it's not to be manipulative. You actually do need them to do that because they will tend to overpower. Now, the other thing that happens, oftentimes the rooster sort of does this in a sort of soliloquy fashion. You notice how she stood up and pontificate. And so oftentimes you're the person who has to, you may have to jump in between breaths to get the person to say, okay, let's stop, let's get this back on track. So those are just a few of the things. Let's see how the president handles this.
Thank you, Bonnie. I really appreciate the idea. And I think it's really important to hear from everyone at the table. Specifically you, Greg, you seem to have some response to Bonnie's idea.
Yeah, I think should be in better financial shape, but nobody's going to pay higher dues. It just won't work.
Bah. Freeze. Okay, it just won't work, right? How many times do we hear that when an idea is there? That we're calling is the naysayer. And so the naysayer is someone who is proficient at negativity, and they can just suck the life out of, of the room. And so it's someone who is really not very good at brainstorming because they see their role as, finding the bad in any idea. Once again, the thing that's important for all of the behaviors that are here, it's important to treat the person with respect, but to correct the behavior. And that is important, because if you're not, everybody's going, well, how can you just let this happen? So the thing that you do with someone who is a naysayer, first of all, notice at the very beginning of this that he actually was in agreement that, yeah, we need to do something to improve the financial shape. So wherever you can find agreement, common agreement, you build on that. That's an important thing to do, and that'll be a theme that we'll talk about at the end as well. The other thing is, okay, well, remember we're brainstorming. There's no bad idea. You got to keep reminding when that happens. And so, all right, so Greg, if that doesn't work, what do you think would work? Again, force them to shift it into something that's positive and continue to recognize and reinforce brainstorming rules. The other thing you can say is, we'll have a chance to do the pros and cons at a certain point. So hold that thought, but what do you think would work? President?
So Greg, I'm really glad that you're in agreement that we need to improve our financial health. And as a CPA, I know that that's important to you. At this point, we are just brainstorming ideas, and so there's no really bad idea. And so what I want to do is to take some time later when we've decided on a course of action, and we can look at the pros and cons more carefully. So do you have any ideas that you would like to offer the group?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Of course.
I should have thought about this earlier. I would like to get these ideas down on a flip chart so that we have something that we can look back on and that we can use for the future. So, Ann, would you mind helping us with that? We're trying to improve our financial situation, and our first idea is to increase dues. So are there any other ideas from the board?
Madam President, I have an idea. Over the last 5 years that I've been in Rotary, one of the things I've recognized is that we have not enough people shouldering the load of Rotary. And I think if we had a great focus on membership recruitment, that we'll be able to get more members in here and, of course, would address our financial issue. As I look into this boardroom, everyone in here has influence. They've gotten in this room for a reason, and I think we need to have more focus and attention on what we can bring to our club. Personally, I think I can bring in 30 members myself, and if we had every individual to come in here once a month to recruit and bring in membership, then we could affect this negative trend that has happened with our membership decline. That is a very strong possibility that we can bring to the table to ensure that we can keep our membership dues relatively low.
Breeze? This is our enlarger. So, the idea came up with a great idea. There's nothing wrong with that. The enlarger, though, has a tendency, and some people think, to results right off the bat without thinking about resources and implications, et cetera. And what he did was already started committing the board to something that really is a collaborative process in terms of setting goals. And he's off track, right? He was fine in the first idea of saying, let's increase, our membership. But he went further. The enlarger is also the one who, whenever you have an idea, will tend to broaden the scope of an idea. And we call it scope creep, right? So that is a person who is very good at it. And the thing you have to be careful with is the rest of the board may agree, okay, I guess we'll do this, right? If the president doesn't do anything about it. The board may agree, but they don't really agree, which means we don't have buy-in. And so there is a process, and actually what he's done is he's kind of gone further with this. So he enlarged the whole thing. So what do? You recognize, great idea, appreciate the enthusiasm, but when we're setting goals, that's something that we'll do collaboratively with each other. Now, I want to make one comment, though, about the enlarger. There are times when you really do need the enlarger. You know, I mean, when everybody is just thinking small, they can't think outside the box. So there are times when you might really bring that enlarger in to get some things going. It's just that little path, that little tiny detail about committing the board to, trying to commit the board to some goals, because you're not going to get buy-in with that. So let's thaw this and see what the president does.
Brandon, I think it's a really good idea to get the board members involved with membership development. I think that's great. And I think it should be one of the ideas that we pursue. So let's consider increasing membership up there. But I think that it's really important that we make this a concerted effort that we all agree that we want to do. So, and Kelly, you have something you'd like to add?
Well, yes, I do. We've tried this idea of expanding the club rapidly, excuse me, back when we decided to be the largest club in the world. And look what happened. We got a lot of new members who didn't really get engaged in Rotary, didn't come to a lot of the meetings, and then after a year went by, most of them dropped out. And so our club right now is a nice, comfortable size. That's one of the things I really like about it, and I don't want to see us change that.
Freeze. I don't want to change. This is our no change person. This is our resistor to any change. The word comfortable. Gee, it's a comfortable size, And really, this person is someone a little bit similar to the naysayer, has a similar effect, in taking the energy out of things. But there really is something. Resistors tend to sort of romanticize somehow the past, this golden era. And so you got to sort of move them along with that. Again, reminding them that we're just brainstorming. We're not making decisions. But the other thing that's important, because otherwise they will, really could stifle the conversation, is help them to see the positive of the change. And the idea that, that what is it they say? The definition of insanity is, doing the same thing and expecting different results. Okay? So what might be some positive things that we could bring out about why we would want to increase our size? Now, the other point I want to make is that when you have working groups that then go off, for instance, and address some of these issues, resistors are actually very valuable to you because they will identify the barriers to change. And you need to get them out in the open. So people say, oh, I hate that, people just digging their heels in. If you put them to good use, they can then come up with, it's okay, so what would be some strategies we would put in place to keep that feel, but yet still grow? And then you're not losing the concerns and everything that they have. Okay? Let's see how we handle it.
I like our club too, Kelly. I've been a member as long as you have. And I think bringing in more members will definitely change the chemistry and the dynamics in our club. But when we add new members, we get new energy for our charitable giving and for our club operations. And I think we can work to find ways to retain the friendships and the flavor of our club while we bring in new members. Okay. David.
Freeze.
David.
Yeah.
It was Rotary meeting.
Okay, so this is our disengaged member, right? I mean, and from the beginning. Now, we've all been mortified, believe me. We've all been mortified that our phone rings during something. We forgot to turn it off. We thought it was off. I mean, this is a little different. He came in late, looking at the phone. He's just not engaged. And this is a personal pet peeve that I have because it's almost like whatever is going on in his life is more important than what the rest of the people are focused on. And I think it's somewhat insulting. So, but that's just my opinion. One of the things that's important is here, and she didn't do it, and that is every meeting you should have some recognized ground rules. I mean, it's just so critical. And we take them for granted. So certainly everybody turns their phones off, but I would suggest you go further than this. And I would have these ground rules posted And you can actually engage your team in setting those ground rules. I'll share with you some of mine. I call them the B rules. My name's Beverly, so it's the B rules for Bev's rules. And so first is to be present. Okay? So being present, certainly, be engaged, phones off, all the no texting, that sort of a thing. But it also means to be engaged, all right? We all can have the face that, oh yeah, I'm really engaged, and we are solving, world hunger in our homes behind the scenes. You're not engaged. So really talk to people about, this is an important thing that we're about. We have this much time, and our group, we owe our full attention to what we're about. So be engaged. The other is to be focused. So being focused means let's stay on the task at hand, the agenda item. Don't, take different trails off. Be generous. Be generous with your thoughts. Be generous with, your insights, your wisdom, etc. And because there are people who, may not want to share their ideas. But be generous also means something else, and I make it very clear. Be generous, sharing the oxygen in the room. Okay, what I mean by that is everybody has, our rooster was a great example, there's always something that they want to, get their point out and all, and can go on and on. Let's share the oxygen in the room, okay? So let's make sure we allow everybody the time. Let's get off our soapbox if we need to, and it's just a little reminder. Being respectful. Respect means no side conversations. It means certainly not attacking a person or being very respectful in the way we disagree. And then the last is to be courageous. And it kind of goes a little bit back to being generous, but sometimes it really takes courage to put your ideas out there. And so when you set up ground rules like that, it's a very powerful thing, because then you also tell your group, hey, these are our rules, and we're all responsible for following these. And if anybody sees that anybody's not, following a ground rule, feel free to say, wait, I think we kind of busted one of our rules, okay? So that's very important. The other thing that you do with someone who's disengaged, sometimes you can move them a little closer to the throne, right? So that there's just a little bit more expectation that, you need to be engaged. And the other is to give them a job. If, rather than saying, here, take notes, you know what? I would love to have you capture our ideas and anything else. Yeah, right, And so, and look for ways to have some things where people are engaged, because if you can, if your agenda is just, nonstop like this, it really is, easy to lose people. Okay, so, thaw.
So David, that call reminds me that we did not follow our ground rules for the meeting. Everybody should have their cell phones off. And we'll take a break at the end of this brainstorming session, and we can get back to checking for messages and emails. But I'd really like to focus our attention today on the ideas that are in front of us, because this is a really critical time for us. We need to be thinking about this. So are there any other ideas that we could include?
You guys, look, if we're going to make a deep impact, we need something big. We need to make some real money, have a big fundraiser, have it at a big hotel like the Grand Hyatt, fill the room with 1,000 people. I was at an event last night. The band was phenomenal. They're free October 23rd. One of my best friends is a planner at no charge. She can get after this. We made a reservation this morning. Come on, we have to do something big.
Free. He took me for real, free. This is our committer. And, what enthusiasm. You'd love to bottle that energy, right? But just a little problem is that he's already committing the board to things. And that, if that's not corrected, that can have some pretty serious ramifications on the board. There are processes for that. And so, here, a good example is to use humor. And particularly if you've got a good relationship. Whoa, Paul, hold that. You know, you're getting in front of the headlights here, but great enthusiasm. I love it. Let's back up. A great idea, but we need to talk about there is a process for how we go about doing this. And so the point of this that's interesting is that this may be a process issue. Did he know that that's not how you commit resources to the board? Okay? So it's also a good idea to say, you know, this kind of take a little bit of the heat off of him and say that let's take this and put this as a parking lot issue, that we need to revisit what our procedures are in this area. And then I think you do have to make sure that there is something that says we're going to meet offline so that we can perhaps see what we should do about what you've just committed us to, right? So let's see what the president does.
Paul, I love your enthusiasm. You know, you always have great ideas, but I think it's really important for us to go through the proper procedures for financially committing funds, and I don't know that we really have that clearly defined, so I think we ought to probably take some time, maybe at a special meeting or next meeting, and we could talk about how you set budgets and how you get approvals and, you know, purchase order systems, whatever things that we need to do to make sure that we're spending our club's funds wisely. So let's put a parking lot thing down here for reviewing procedures.
Oh, my dog. We've been down this road before. He always has these big ideas. Remember the time he spent the money that wasn't budgeted and we had to dip into our reserves and line of credit to cover the expense? I do.
Freeze. That was meant to be a side conversation, but he projects so wonderfully. So this is the saboteur, okay, that pure and simple. This is someone who that's a personal attack. He's undermining, you know, the person and the idea, certainly. And what happens, you know, here we got the benefit of hearing it in a side conversation, but this is also the person that will go and do what I call back channeling. You know, you've made a decision, we think we've got it, and then we really didn't, and so then we can go and sort of torpedo the idea one person at a time. And this is something that I talked about the ground rules. So certainly he busted the respect rule, okay, because it was a side conversation, and you just can't let that go. Now, you still have to be respectful in the way that you correct the behavior. That's always the delicate balance. And there are, you know, a few ways to do this. Some people will say, okay, so, hey, share. Is there something that we need to all listen to about this idea? Remember, though, we are brainstorming. There's no wrong, bad idea here. And the other thing that some people do is, and I don't know if you've ever done it, and it really makes it a little uncomfortable, but you sort of pause, wait for the conversation to stop, and then, you know, all eyes go right here, and it's uncomfortable, okay? But the point being is somehow you can't just let that go on, because then otherwise you're sanctioning that. And this is also certainly a situation where if this is happening in the boardroom, it's happening outside of the board meeting, and certainly if there's a pattern, you need to deal with that offline. That is the leader's responsibility. So let's thaw this and see how she handles it.
Okay, folks, let's stay on track here. It's really important that we not have sidebar conversations. We're all in this together. We didn't put up here on the board, we need to add Paul's big idea about a big fundraiser. That's another idea and something that we can consider. Kelly. So do you have anything, Stephen, that you'd like to add? Any other ideas?
Not so much.
Well, back to Paul's idea of a big fundraiser. If we open the party up to the public, how will we charge them? How will we invite them? How are we going to ask our members to invite guests or advertise the event in the newspaper? Or how will we get tickets?
Freeze. All right, this is our nitpicker, all right? This is the person who just can't resist getting into the details or the weeds of things. And what's important here is that the board should be about setting strategy. That sort of, discussion takes place in a working committee, right? And so it's important to, it really can derail a meeting, and you can just, it's what I call you go down these rabbit trails if it's just allowed to go, and certainly getting in the weeds. So again, recognize great points. That's not where we're at. This is sort of out of scope right now. That term out of scope is something that I use quite a bit. So it's out of scope to go into the details, the weeds. It's out of scope to set goals for the organization. And so when you are talking about being focused as a ground rule, that's one of the things that you can do as the leader to keep things in focus. Now, in addition, this person, though, is probably ideal to be on one of these working committees, right? So, keep that thought, and maybe that's where, if the time comes that this is one of those ideas that we're going to go after, you might be just the right person. So let's turn it to the president.
Bianca, you raised some really good logistical points, and you are always great at figuring out how things need to be done. So if we decide that the fundraiser is the best option for us, I hope you'll consider heading up the committee or being a part of it so that you can help us cover all these things that need attention. So, Brent, I haven't heard anything from you. Or do you have anything you'd like to say? Any ideas kicking around?
I don't know. I don't know what to think. There's so many good ideas out there, and we could raise the dues. I think that's a great idea. We could get more members too. I think that's a great idea too. I think a big fun event. That's like a really good idea too. They all have great potential. Yeah,
I freeze. I told you this is fun. This person we're calling Meek, and I understand he's not, but I mean Meek. And this is the person who perhaps doesn't have the confidence, particularly when there's such strong personalities out there. People take different amount of time to process information and to come up with things. So it really is legitimate sometimes that not everybody jumps to an idea right away. Now, one thing that you can do here, a process that I have used quite a bit and really is effective, it's a slight variation of brainstorming. So you set the brainstorming rules, but what you do is you say, okay, before we get started, let's take a few moments. We're all going to just privately jot down our own ideas. And again, there's no right idea. No wrong or right idea. We're not making a decision. That's the other thing, is he's afraid of a decision, right? So this is not about decision making. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go round robin with our ideas. And that is a very effective way to get everybody to speak up. Now, if you know that Meek takes time, you don't start at that end of the table, right? Okay? So you go around, and then each person is sharing an idea, and then we keep going around. It's a very effective way when you've got different levels of, perhaps energy and insight. And again, we all process our ideas differently. The other thing, unfortunately, that happens with Meek is often the person who is always on the fence when we're trying to make a decision. And think about what that does. That really keeps you from moving forward with your agendas and with progress. So it is someone that you may need to meet with afterwards. Is there anything that you need to be more comfortable? So let's thought and see what the president does for me.
So Brent, thank you for for sharing your thoughts on that. I think we're still in the brainstorming stage, and we don't really need to be voting on what we want to do at this point in time. So,
Well, I hear Brent loud and clear, and what he really wants is an event.
Okay, freeze. Well, that was our interpreter. So the interpreter is the one who is there to rephrase. You know, this is what he meant. And you got to be careful, because oftentimes in the rephrasing, all she's doing is rephrasing what she thinks, you know, should be the solution. I do think there's individuals who play this role sometimes really do believe that they are trying to help somebody who has trouble communicating or making a decision. But what can also happen on that is poor Meek over here, you know, you've just reinforced that he's a lousy communicator, right? So it doesn't really help. And this is another one who you could take offline when you see if this is a pattern and say to them, look, you know, I know you're really trying to help out, and I appreciate it, and I know it's maybe frustrating, but we want everyone's voice to be heard. So I need your help. Let's make sure that we don't, you know, try to speak for you don't have to necessarily name names, but the point being is we want to make sure everybody's voice is heard. But do, again, with respect, I know you're really trying to help. So let's thaw, see where we are.
Brent, is that really what you had in mind, the fundraiser?
No, but I think I need more time to think about this.
Well, I've been listening to all of this discussion, and it will be a lot of work for us to have this fundraiser. A lot of work, and it's only a one-time deal. And this idea about us getting more members, great idea. Also, a lot of work, and it could take an entire year. It's clear to me, and it should be clear to all of us, that raising dues is the only answer. Simple.
Well, it sounds like we're revisiting some ideas that are already up here on the board. So what I'm going to suggest is that I will take on the task of pulling some of these concepts together, and I'll send them out. And our homework before the next board meeting will be to think about the pros and the cons of all of these ideas and come to the board with the idea or two ideas that you think are really workable. And then we will work together to come to an agreement on the board for a course of action. So we'll make that our top priority at our next board meeting, and I really appreciate all your good ideas. Thank you.
Let's give our board a round of applause. Didn't know such great actors here. That's great. I'd like to just summarize a little bit and emphasize some things, a little bit of what I've already said as well. These techniques that we've talked about certainly effective in the board meeting, but I would also say to you that they're just as effective when you're dealing with individuals outside of the meeting. I guarantee you, as we've said, the naysayers are saying nay outside of the meeting. The saboteurs are doing this. So when you are aware, whether it's in the meeting or outside of the meeting, that this is happening, this behavior is happening, it's up to you to do something about it. Because if you don't, you're basically sanctioning that behavior. The other point of this is that you don't have to do it alone. I think it's really powerful, and whether you did it at the beginning when you were in your role or you're getting ready to go in the role, is to say, let's talk about how we're going to work together. What are our rules of engagement? We are all here for a reason. We want to all have, what is that common agreement? What are we all here for? Let's come up with how we're going to run our meetings, because I got to tell you, I know of a lot of people that when they have a choice, if they're in a meeting or whatever, a nonprofit, whatever, and it's voluntary, having meetings that just get poorly managed over and over again is a very common reason that people leave and don't stay. So it is something that has to be dealt with. So you can engage the rest of your members in this process. We are all responsible for having effective board meetings. And so if we have these ground rules, and everyone is free, including correct me if I've busted the ground rule, okay? So that sort of environment, I think, is a very good one. I think the other point is you can't control what comes out of somebody's mouth, okay? You just can't. But you can correct the behavior. And in time, you will find that there will be some norms, agreed upon norms in terms of how we should be in the meeting. And the meeting and those behaviors can shift through time. So just some things, again, I've touched a little bit on this. I want to go back to these. A sense of humor. If you've got a good relationship with your board, use that. The sense of humor can diffuse things often, particularly if you're in a contentious kind of a topic. So use your sense of humor. Use your relationship skills. Find the common agreement. Stay positive. When things turn negative, you are the one that needs to keep things on a very positive note. Process. I just can't say it enough. And setting those expectations up front. So ground rules, brainstorming, prioritization. There are so many great books, material out there on strong facilitation techniques. And I would encourage you to look through some of those because that's really what it's about. You're facilitating that meeting. And so really good ones there. The other is using parking lot is a great way to kind of keep people on track and focused. And the other thing, which I thought our president did a great job of, is watching the body language in the room. And you're seeing people shaking their heads, rolling their eyes, on the phones, doing this and that. She did a great job of, you haven't said anything. Or, I see you shaking your head. What's going on? And that's okay to do that, to call that out. So watch for the body language because it can be that sort of signal something's getting ready to happen, or it will after the meeting. And then finally, as I mentioned, it's important that you deal with issues offline if they become a pattern. It's just absolutely critical because you'll spend more time, if you don't, in the meeting trying to manage it and keep it on track. And sometimes that's the very best that you can do. So those techniques, I hope, have been very helpful. I hope that you've enjoyed this. We have some time, and we've got a microphone.
I would like to introduce our cast for
good.
you
Okay,
so that
great.
you know that these are people who are not just unidimensional. Mr. Meek down here is actually Brent Fessler. He is the president of Hallmark University in San Antonio. Next to him is Amy Contreras, who is very influential in her career at Ernst & Young, and she happens to be the chair of the Board of Champions for City Year and is a fabulous leader. We all are trying to interpret what she's saying so that we can do a better job. Paul Garrow was a former executive director for City Year San Antonio and now has been elevated to principal of Central Catholic High School, which is a long-standing high school in San Antonio, and is bringing his wonderful talents. He is very, very creative. He doesn't go off the tracks. He knows how to bring people back on the tracks. And then we have Greg Murray, who is in fact a CPA, but is not as negative as you might think. He is the light at the end of the tunnel. He does a lot of work with companies that are going into bankruptcy, and he brings them back alive. So he thinks outside the box a lot more than you would think. And Bonnie Reed is Judge Bonnie Reed. She is a retired judge, but she is fabulous in many organizations. She is sought after. She also has an amazing voice and has done a little bit of theater. So, Bonnie, thank you for that. And we have Kelly Ranson, who has been in our Rotary Club for some time. He is an amazing person. He has an oil and gas property company, and he has done hiking in the Grand Canyon. So He's gimpy today, but he's really good most of the time. Next to him is Brandon Logan, who's one of our rising stars in our club. He has a company that is an athletics company, but he embodies service in a way that no one else I know does. He is the kind of person that when we're going to collect 400 books for some schools, he says, well, there's 623 kids in this school in the 4th and 5th grade. Let's go after 623. And then we collected 1,400. So he's a visionary, and he is a great person, and we are thrilled that you are in our club. Next to him is Bianca Maldonado, and she is, in fact, the most logistically oriented person I know. She is fabulous, and she's very creative. She was at the heart of a fundraiser that we did for our youth charities, and it was a spelling bee, and it started out as just a social and became a bigger thing than that. It was at our luncheon, and each of us who were spellers selected one of our Rotary youth charitable organizations to promote, and we raised so much more money in one day than we would have if we had just been stringing it out over the time, and that is in grave part to Bianca Maldonado.
Joan won the spelling bee, and she won it with the word indictment.
I read the newspapers. What can I say? And then we have just the inimitable Stephen Bull. He is fabulous. He is, by day, he is the manager of Ethan Allen Gallery Furniture, but he is the most creative person that you would ever want to meet. He has a beautiful voice, and he sang one of the Prince's roles in Into the Woods, and if you know anything about Stephen Sondheim, that is the hardest music to do, and his voice was exquisite. And he's still doing theater. Amazing. And then, of course, you know David Ballard, who is far from disengaged. Sometimes we have to bring him back and remind him, but he is a terrific person. He's got a great sense of humor. He was willing to be our disengaged, and I really appreciate his leadership, and I hope to be as good a president as he is. And the woman who needs no introduction.
Okay, so we have a few minutes. I know we didn't touch on all the behaviors, and you may have your own thoughts on some of this. So David's going to have the microphone, and we will have some questions then, or comments.
Thank you. You all were wonderful. This is the best. My name is Theresa Carl. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. And I have sort of a two-part question. Would you speak to the physical setup of a board meeting and how that impacts the ability to have a great board meeting? And secondly, would you speak to the importance or not importance of always reaching consensus? And if it's impossible to reach consensus, how to move forward from there? Just two little questions.
Yeah, I think, first of all, the way this is set up, I actually enjoy where you can see each other, everybody sees each other. So a little bit more, because then we can look at each other, and it also, it's really easy for him down here to be disengaged. So I think there is something about the physical layout of the room. And then also, as we mentioned earlier, there are some times that you literally, and I think that it is important that you sit people where they should be seated, right? Just based on what you know about them. So I think that's important. Consensus. Consensus is we can all agree to support something. That's my definition of consensus. That does not mean that we are all in agreement. So, and I think it's important to say what it is we're agreeing to. So if we make a decision, they go through this, you maybe prioritize and we decide. When you're seeking consensus, you want to have, there is a time then to talk about the pros and cons, and go through this, and people have the right to say what they feel and think about something. So, but at the end of the day, if he still does not agree that this is the direction, then my question is, we'd like to have consensus. Will you support us with this? And that's different than everybody agreeing. Now, this is very true in a business environment, and I think it's also true with your board as well, is that if this means that you agree, then that means when you go out and afterwards talk with other people, it's okay to say that we went through a process, we had this conversation, I had some concerns, but at the end of the day, I'm supporting this for this reason. Okay? We all know in situations in business where managers go off and they agree, and then they go off and they say, well, that wasn't what I wanted, but what choice did I have? That is just wrong. So when we say consensus, then you get everybody to say what we've agreed on and that we will support each other. Does that help? Good. David over here.
Yeah, what about the withdrawal? The guy, the board member who loses a couple votes and then just simply
Checks out. Yeah.
And says, I'm sorry, people don't, how do you re-engage them?
Yeah, yeah. I think, and you can see their body language, they're whatever, and, all of that kind of thing. So first I would, in the meeting, say that we, it sounds like it'd be more of a decision kind of a thing. So we didn't get your decision. Okay, so then I have an issue about do I have consensus or not. And it may be if you don't have buy-in. So that's the other thing as a leader is make sure that you're watching the body language, because if you've made a decision and you've got the checked out, I would say, look, I'm seeing too much body language here. Let's have some more conversation about this, or maybe we're not ready to make that decision. So tell me, what are you still concerned about? And so I would try to do that. If they are just checked out, then that's an offline conversation at some point, because, yeah, I think so. I think you, in the meeting, try to bring them in, but then afterwards, if they truly are checked out, look, I'm concerned. We need you engaged. You are an important part of this board, and you're, withdrawing. So we're not always going to get decisions to go in our direction, but we need you. So I think you have to definitely call it, but that's a great one.
You talked about back channeling, but you didn't get to it. How do you handle that behavior?
Well, back channeling is I handle it first proactively by talking about rules of engagement. And I don't know if who's the guy that wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team? Lencioni, Patrick Lencioni. Great book, because what happens is that first you have to have trust, then you have to be able to have healthy conflict, and then once you have healthy conflict, then you get commitment. But if I have commitment, then I hold people accountable, and when I hold people accountable, I'll get results. So that's the way. So the situation with someone back channeling, that's trust. Because I trusted that in our session, you were going to share what your thoughts were. Okay? Now, in this situation, we were brainstorming. So the point that's important there is we will have our time to discuss the pros and cons. Remember brainstorming, we're just using this time. So hold your thoughts. We'll come back to them. So that would be one thing I would say, but also a rule of engagement is that when we have issues, we talk about it in our session. If I find out somebody's back channeling, do the same thing. I come back and say, hey, this is really a bust of trust. So, yes.
Many of us have large boards, 20 or more people on the board. And I've had a couple of conversations over the last couple of days about whether it's time to scale back. And I guess I would be interested in your thoughts on ideal board sizes.
Well, it kind of depends on the mission of the board, I would have to say that. There are ways that you can deal with a large board. And for instance, rather than trying to kind of do this sort of a thing, you can put people in groups. So there, I would hold my meeting in a place where we might have tables, Each table would be asked to come up with some ideas for how, we're going to raise funds and prioritize their ideas, and then we listen out and hear out from that. So there are some ways, and it may be that you have to do groups that way. That is very much, if it's that large, ground rules are absolutely critical. And I think that it seems like a large group, but I'm on a board that has probably that many, and typically you've got sort of an executive group that meets first, and then the other. So it takes you to, because it's hard sometimes to be able to see all this body language and what have you. So you really have to set up front, you're going to need to raise your hand if you, we talk about the physical, this space, the room is kind of like this, so some people sit around here, and then you have people all around the back, and it's hard. It is hard. But the executive committee oftentimes will meet first. That's their approach. They meet first. They will flesh out things and have a little bit more conversation, and then you come out and with the larger board and have, here's what we've done, here's what we've done. But then you've got to engage them, or otherwise, why would I even be on this board? So using your executive committee is a good one there, too. Oh, I didn't.
My question really is a follow-up on what you already covered. In a case, because this is amazingly, this is our board. This is amazing.
I know.
The follow-up is, how does the president, or how do you handle, as you said, a disruptive behavior or someone that is making a personal attack on someone constantly? And it is certainly way outside the four-way test. It's not anything like this. Is there ever a chance to remove the person, or how do you go about doing that if you can do that?
Yeah, I think you can. I think that you start with the things we've already talked about. And if that, what I would actually do are they sort of that way with the same person or anybody? Well, it could be anyone. Okay, yeah, because if it's the same person, that there are some issues, and maybe you need to get those people together with you to talk about what's going on. Okay, so that would be, one if it was sort of the same person. If this is just a cantankerous person who, is critical of everything, I would ask them the question to say, you just don't seem happy here. And, life is too short to, with your own time, volunteer time, to be in a place when you're not happy. And when you're not happy, no one's happy. And I'm not happy. So what will it take for you to be a positive, engaged member of our board? I'd like for you to go and think about that. You don't have to answer that now. I'd like for you to go and think about that, and then let's get back together after you've thought about it. Because, I'd hate to lose you. You're here for a reason, but it's my responsibility. That's how I'd handle it. Yeah.
Do you have any advice on how to handle a member that maybe consistently misunderstands what people are saying?
Do they have a hearing problem?
No.
No? Yeah, wow, that's a good one. On something like that, it would really take a little bit of asking. Asking questions are just great ways to do. So, what part of this did you not understand? No, I don't mean it that way. You know what I'm saying? Sounds like something I would have said to my son. No. So, and again, some of these, if there's really some issues, I mean, there may be some problems. I think that this could be a person who is a little slower in processing. No? No?
Everybody else will completely understand what was being said, and this member will just totally take it completely out of context, and it can be very uncomfortable at times.
Yeah. Well, and so you can't let that person stall the meeting. So that would be one thing. So you have to be, you do as best you can in explaining, what is it that I need to clarify. asking whoever was speaking, could you clarify? This is where, of course, the interpreter comes in and says, well, what she's struggling with is, right? And this is maybe when you need the interpreter, right? but then, you do have to make sure that everybody's at least understanding. But if not, I think I would have to talk to the person afterwards. Is there a way that we're not communicating that, how can we help you to make sure that you get it? Because we need to make sure you understand something, particularly if we're going to vote on. So asking that person from their standpoint of where did you, kind of get that idea? You might be able to get a little bit of how their brain's working. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Anybody have ideas? That's a tough one. Oh, we have one more. Okay. You okay on time?
My question is about boards when you have a contentious issue and you've got some peer pressure going on in the board or maybe even at the committee level, and you almost have to go to like a secret vote because the person is almost being bullied into going, the board is being bullied into going the direction that the individual wants, but in reality the board is not in favor of what's being proposed.
Okay. Well, and so that for sure is a situation where you got to deal with the bullying, that for sure. One thing that you can do if you have an issue is frame the issue first. And this might also help. When you have an issue, you frame it so that we're all very clear about what it is we're talking about. And then you put a lot of structure into something like that. But very much if there is, sort of that rooster who's really forcing their views, I think you need to make sure that we hear that view, we hear others, and absolutely you could do, one of the things that works, I don't know if you've ever seen this, you can take alternatives. So you frame the issue, you generate alternatives for how you could address it, you capture them on a board, you literally then, you've got your alternatives, you can turn the board around, you give people sticky dots, and you say, all right, you go vote. And they go, nobody sees how anybody's voting, and you just have seen without anybody, putting that pressure. So it starts with framing the issue and generating the alternatives in a very good structured way, having people talk about it, but making sure that it's productive, and then that kind of a vote is a good process. Okay.
Tom Van from Houston, and this is probably unique to our club, but as the meeting goes on, and I appreciate what you talked about being engaged, but you'll look up at our meeting, and once one person starts checking their smartphone under the table, it becomes an epidemic, and you'll suddenly look up, and everybody's checking their phones. And how do you address that and get everybody re-engaged?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can call it. It may be that if you can call a break, and that's always a good way to do it, and to say, you know what, this is too important, and it looks like I'm losing you. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and here's the agreement. You look at your phones, you do all of that, but when you come back, phones go away. How we do, does that work? And people go, oh, okay, that's great. So that's a good way to handle that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think your rooster was real polite a while ago. How do you take and handle somebody that doesn't draw breath and you can't politely get to the point to reframe?
Yeah.
They actually had to instruct me that I had to stay on script.
Yeah. So I would, if you can't find that break, there is a breath in there, and I would say, hold on, you can kind of put your hand up. Let's stop for 1 minute. You have to, and particularly, I am a very loud person. I mean, you could hear me if I didn't have this on. So you really need to exert, some of your voice in that. Time out, you do those kinds of things and say, I hear you, I think we've got it, but I'd like to get everybody else's take on this. I mean, you just have to do that. That doesn't.
Midpoint. I mean, you know where they're going.
Yeah.
They just won't get there.
Well, so, yeah, and that's a person I call also the rambler. If you have the rooster and the rambler together, oh my gosh, what a combination that is. A rambling rooster, right? Okay.
I actually told Beverly before we started
Yeah, this is funny.
that I really didn't understand that there was a problem with this.
Yes.
and I said that one of the skills that I have is that I always think that I have an understanding of where my audience is. And if I don't have them convinced yet, I just keep talking.
Keep talking, yeah. Yeah, so I hope we've learned something here, Bonnie.
Bonnie, that's why I loved having you on my board.
No, so on something like that, where they're rambling, that is a great one to say, okay, I'm going to stop you here. You interrupt. You have to interrupt. I'm going to stop you here. Give me 2 sentences that tells me what it is your issue of concern. In other words, you give them some boundaries, but you interrupt them, you stop them, and if they can't do that, well then, it's a different issue. But it'll get the message across. So it is, and you can also say, I know you're passionate about this, because typically when they keep going on and on, they're typically, applaud them. You're passionate about this, and I know you're anxious to, but I want to make sure we stay on focus, and I'm anxious to hear, give me your soundbite of what your issue is.
What if it's the president?
Woo!
Maybe
good.
it's funny to you, but what if it's the president that's guilty of 2 things that are rather disruptive? One is he is the most disengaged by checking his cell phone. But more importantly, if in the course of a discussion there happens to be 2 opinions, they're not necessarily opposites, but 2 opinions would rather table a vote than to proceed with supposedly 2 different opinions.
Yeah, you're in trouble. You may want to have an intervention. I'm for real, an intervention. You actually get someone, not to have a bunch, but maybe one other person that is respected on that board, that is credible, and you ask to meet with the president and say, a couple of things we want to share with you, and if we were in your shoes, we would want someone to say something to us, kind of thing. And here's something that we're noticing, and we need your help. So I do think you do it, but that, if you've got a great relationship with them and you think you can do it without, but, too many times the emperor has no clothes, and that, you can just, you'll lose people with that if you don't do something about it. And that's why it's important to have, training around those kinds of things. But yeah, I would do it with the help of somebody, but I would do it, because otherwise you're all going to be wasting time, and it's going to be a very short board experience for some.
It's sort of like the rooster, except it's the gentle version of the rooster, and they're so endearing that everybody just agrees because they're so sweet and they've done so much for Rotary, and that's happened time and time again in our club, and later we'd go, what happened?
Yeah.
How did we approve that?
How did we, yeah.
And it's because of the person, the charmer. That's a great word.
The charmer, yeah. Well, and that's a little bit, who did we have I think we were talking about the goal setting. I mean, I was ready to sign up for those goals. I don't know about you. And so there's a little bit of the same kind of thing there. I think that you need to make sure that we have consensus. That would be one thing. You can do voting is another, but particularly if they are going on and on and on, you use some of these same processes we've talked about. It's harder because everybody loves them, but I think you might also appeal. This is the person I would go to offline and say, I need your help. I mean, everybody just, really looks to you And so I need your help in letting others speak or whatever. So that would be, might be a pretty easy person, because if they are so charming, then you say, you know, you're really so well respected. And yet what concerns me is because you have that power and authority, and it carries with the rest of the group, I'm afraid that we may be agreeing to things that we're not. Now, the other is in the group it's almost like, I don't know if you know the way that she said, is this really what you're saying? Okay, so you say to the others, okay, we're going to take a vote. And maybe it's the secret ballot, you know, vote kind of thing, or maybe it's, you know, really having a discussion and then declaring a vote. And then you can kind of get that person off a bit. But I would talk with them offline. Mm-hmm.
So is there an ideal time limit for board meetings? We've had some that like over 2.5 hours.
Oh.
Are there some that you just say, it's time to go and we'll just start this next time?
Yeah, so 2.5 hours would be too long.
That's committee work.
Yeah, that's committee work. So that must be one where there's a reason that it's going that long. I personally think an hour and a half, no more than 2 hours, but an hour and a half is a good time. Agendas, sticking to agendas, and sometimes you really have to be, you got to be not a tyrant, I mean a good tyrant, but I mean you have to kind of keep things on focus and say, and if it's going on and on, then it may mean that, on a topic, it may mean that it's tabled for next time. Use your parking lot, because that would get a meeting to be a little bit, more in line with the time, because a parking lot is a wonderful thing. I think this is out of scope. We're going to put this on the parking lot. We have 2 more minutes, folks, on this agenda topic. You can do that. This is all we're going to allow on this, and then we need to move on. And so if it's something, or we'll go off, you can do homework assignments. We're going to, I'm going to capture this. We're going to send it out. At our next meeting, we'll be ready to discuss further. So you just have to, but 2.5 is way too long. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold that thought.
Do you have any suggestions on how to inspire or ensure that the board members come prepared to the board meeting, that they come having read the materials and are actually prepared to be engaged?
No, I don't. No. Well, one of the things that let me back up on something. Using, do y'all use consent agendas? So that's a really good way to make sure that that's another way to manage some of the time. So, and the way you do it is, we use like board reports, so you have different reports, and you can move on and say, I'm assuming everybody has read these things, and anybody have any questions on a particular topic? So after a while, people will get the message that if they haven't come prepared, it's going to be uncomfortable, because we're not going to, and then if you realize that people really haven't, then you got to stop and you say, okay, let's talk about how we're going to do this, because it makes more sense for us to have time reading these reports in advance than for us to discuss them here. And I don't think any of us wants to be here 1 minute longer than we need to be. So I'm going to ask you to read your report beforehand, okay? Because I think it's going to be a better experience for all of us to do that. And so that would be my way of doing it. But it is hard, and people, running in at the last minute, and oh my gosh, I just printed out my agenda. And a little bit of some peer pressure is good on that. And if you can structure a discussion that assumes you've read the board packet, then, it will send the message that they're going to need to. So, you had a
Okay,
question?
one last question.
One last question.
The question I had had to do with the transition of board memberships, because most of us have staggered board terms. And when you look at how one board this year works together and you have these unique personalities, what do you find the best way to transition half of that membership to the next year? You know that certain personalities are still going to be there. How can you manage it in such a way that when you know that you'll have half the new people on the board, that you don't really know how they're going to handle things. What
Okay.
are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what I'm understanding then is that you rotate sort of half and half so that you've got some continuity there. I would, first of all, I'm assuming you do a board orientation with the new members. That would be critical. And there you can talk about the rules of engagement. This is how we operate. And so I would make sure that the new ones coming in have that in their orientation. And then I would have something that is, I don't know if it's a board retreat, but something that gets that group to come together as a group. The old thing, the forming, storming, norming. You have to have something to help the forming piece of it, and recognize there will be some, you're going to do some storming, and you have to be ready for that. But so an orientation and then a retreat to bring them in would be what I'd do. Thank you. It's not like any of us don't have these questions.